For the last 8 months, I told myself I was being a good father. I told myself that moving into the garage apartment was the right thing to do, that it was temporary, that my son needed space, and I had space to give. And that's what fathers do. They give. I was wrong about all of it, but I didn't know that yet. My name is Gordon. I'm 64 years old, retired civil engineer, widower. I spent 31 years designing bridges for the state of Ohio. I know how to calculate load capacity. I know how stress fractures form before anything visibly breaks. I just never thought to apply that knowledge to my own family. My wife Carol passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. That's how fast it went. One day we were talking about a road trip to Savannah, and 6 weeks later, I was standing in our backyard alone, holding her reading glasses because I didn't know where else to put them. After she was gone, the house felt like a building I'd been locked inside without a blueprint. 5 bedrooms, 2.5 acres outside Columbus. We bought it in 1989 thinking we'd fill it with kids. We only had the one, my son Nathan. Nathan is 33. He works in software sales. He's smart, well-dressed, the kind of man who walks into a room and knows immediately how to be liked. Carol adored him. I adored him. Still do. That's the part that makes all of this so hard to say out loud. He met Sienna 2 years after his mother died. She came into his life fast. They were engaged within 8 months, married 11 months after that. I tried to be open to her. I really did. She was beautiful, organized, had strong opinions about everything from wine to tile grout. Nathan lit up around her. I figured that was enough. The house came up at their wedding reception, actually. Not in a formal way. We were standing by the bar, Nathan and he said, "Dad, that house is too big for you alone. You know that, right?" I said, "Yes, I knew that." He said, "Sienna and I have been talking. What if we moved in? Help you take care of the place." I thought he meant they'd come live with me, in my house, together. That's not what he meant. They moved in on a Saturday in March. I spent 2 weeks before that cleaning out the garage, buying a mini fridge, having a friend of mine install a proper bathroom in the space above it. 1,200 square feet. I told myself it was cozy. I told myself it felt like a studio apartment, the kind young men in New York pay $3,000 a month for. It did not feel like that. Nathan and Sienna took the main bedroom, my bedroom, and the 2 rooms adjacent to it. One became a home office for Sienna, one they called the nursery, even though Sienna wasn't pregnant yet and wouldn't be for another 1.5 years. I carried my own furniture out to the garage apartment in 3 trips. I'm a 63-year-old man with 2 replaced knees, and I carried my own furniture out while my son supervised from the driveway, arms crossed, telling me to be careful of the door frame. I smiled and said I'd be fine. Carol would have said something. She always knew when I was swallowing something I shouldn't. She'd look at me with those eyes, not angry, just steady. And she'd say, "Gordon, tell the truth." I could never hide from that look. She wasn't there to give me that look. So I kept swallowing. The first few months weren't bad exactly. I had dinner with them twice a week. I kept up the yard, which I'd always done. I fixed the gutter on the north side that had been pulling away from the fascia board since October. Small things. Ways of being useful. Sienna was polite to me the way you're polite to a neighbor whose name you keep forgetting. Pleasant enough in the moment, a little blink around the edges. She called me Gordon, never Dad. That was fine. I didn't push it. What I noticed slowly was the way the house started to feel like hers and not mine. Small things at first. My mother's china disappeared from the dining room hutch. Sienna said she'd stored it safely because it didn't match the new aesthetic. My armchair, the green one I'd had for 20 years, ended up on the curb one Wednesday. Nathan texted me to say Sienna had donated it. I didn't say anything. I figured it was her home now, too. Adjustment takes time. That's what I told myself standing in my garage apartment, sitting in a folding lawn chair, because my armchair was gone. Then, in August, I got a letter from my bank. a savings account I'd held jointly with Nathan, something we'd set up when he was in college so I could transfer money easily if he needed it, showed a withdrawal I hadn't made. $12,000 moved to an account I didn't recognize. I called Nathan. He said it must be a bank error. I called the bank. They confirmed the transfer had been authorized from Nathan's login credentials, but Nathan told me again it was probably a glitch. He'd look into it. Stop worrying. I let it sit for 2 weeks. I'm not proud of that. Then I noticed the second withdrawal, $18,000 this time. Same account I didn't recognize. I didn't call Nathan. I drove to my bank in person, closed the joint account, and transferred the remaining balance to a solo account Sienna didn't know existed. Then I drove to see my attorney, a woman named Patricia. Wait, I can't use that. Her name was Flo. 40 years practicing family and property law in Franklin County. Carol and I had used her for the estate planning. I sat across from her desk and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which in my experience is how you know someone is actually thinking. When I finished, she said, "Gordon, who was on the deed to your house?" I said my name. Only my name. I never transferred it. She said, "Good. Do you want to know your options?" I want to stop here for a second because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, why did you let it get that far? Why didn't you say something the first time you found the withdrawal? Why didn't you put your foot down when they took your armchair? I've asked myself the same questions every day for the past 8 months. The honest answer is grief. Not fresh grief. Not the kind that breaks you open in the first year. The older kind. The kind that makes you quiet. After Carol died, I became a man who didn't want to cause problems. I'd watched her suffer for 6 weeks without complaining once, and after that, my own discomfort started to seem small and embarrassing. What was I going to do? Throw a fit over an armchair? Nathan is all I have left of her. He has her eyes. He has the exact same habit she had of tilting his head slightly when he's listening to something. When I look at him, I see her, and I don't want to lose that. That's the truth of it. And Sienna knew that. Whether she understood it consciously or not, Flo knew it too, which is why she said what she said next. She said, "You need to document everything, and you need to be patient. Because if this goes where I think it's going, you want to be the person who was clearly, undeniably reasonable." I told her I was good at being patient. She said, "I know. I'm asking you to be strategic about it." I went home. Back to the garage apartment, I mean. And I started paying attention differently. I noticed that Sienna made most of the purchases for the house on a credit card that was linked to a joint account she and Nathan held. Fine. But I also noticed that twice a month, cash withdrawals of $600 were coming out of that account at an ATM 2 miles from our house. Nathan worked from home Tuesdays and Thursdays. The ATM withdrawals happened on Wednesdays. I noticed that Sienna's car, a white Acura she'd owned since before she met Nathan, was sometimes gone on Wednesday afternoons for 2 to 4 hours. She told Nathan she was at yoga. The yoga studio she claimed to attend was in the opposite direction from that ATM. I'm a retired engineer. I notice patterns. I don't draw conclusions until I have data. But I had enough data now to know I was looking at something real. I put a small security camera on the garage exterior, my property, my right, pointed at the driveway. I did this openly. I told Nathan I was thinking about security after a neighbor's truck got broken into. He said, "Good idea." I also set up alerts on the joint account I still had access to, the household one Nathan had added me to so I could help with utility bills. I was still on it. He'd forgotten to remove me. I waited. Sienna's name came up in connection with a man I'll call the instructor. He taught fitness classes at a gym in Westerville. I found this out because she mentioned him by first name, Dex, 3 times in 2 weeks during dinner conversations, each time in a context that was a little too casual, a little too rehearsed. My instructor Dex says interval training is better for metabolism. Dex was saying the same thing. That kind of repetition is a tell. Carol used to say if someone mentions a name too carefully, they've been practicing not to. I'm not a jealous man, and this isn't a story about jealousy. I want to be clear about that. What I cared about was my son, and I cared about the money. $20,000 of my money had gone somewhere, and I wanted to know where before I said a single word to Nathan. On a Tuesday evening in October, I asked Nathan if I could show him something in the garage. Just the two of us. We stood under the fluorescent light beside my workbench. I still had my father's tools hanging on the pegboard. Wrenches in order of size the way he taught me. I pulled out a folder. Inside was a bank statement showing the 2 withdrawals, a printed summary from Flo showing that the account the money had been transferred to was registered in Sienna's name only, opened 3 weeks before the first withdrawal. A log of the ATM withdrawals with dates and times, a printout from the camera showing Sienna's Akira leaving on 4 separate Wednesday afternoons. I didn't say a word. I set the folder on the workbench and waited. Nathan stood there for a long time. He picked up the bank statement. Set it down. Picked it up again. His jaw was doing that thing it used to do when he was a teenager and I'd caught him in something he couldn't explain away. He said, "Dad," I said, "take your time." He said I didn't know about the account. I believed him. That was the thing, I did believe him. That was the thing, I did believe him. Nathan has never been a dishonest person. He's a person who fell in love with someone who was. He started to cry. Not dramatically. Nathan doesn't cry dramatically. Just a reddening around the eyes. A tightening in his throat. He said, "I don't know what to say." I said, "You don't have to say anything right now. But I need you to understand something." I tapped the bank statement. This is documented. Flo has copies of all of it. If this goes further, it goes to a different kind of conversation. He nodded. He looked about 12 years old. I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "I'm not your enemy. I never have been." He said, "I know, Dad." I said, "I need you to really hear that, because what happens next is going to be hard. And I need you to remember that I love you." He started crying for real then. I let him. What happened over the next 6 weeks is something I'll summarize because it's not the part of the story worth dwelling on. Nathan confronted Sienna. She denied the account at first, then admitted to it, then cried, then said she'd been saving for security because she didn't feel financially stable in the marriage. The instructor was addressed separately. She denied that too for about 40 minutes, and then she stopped denying it. Nathan called Flo himself. Flo connected him with an attorney who handled the financial recovery. The full $20,000 was returned within 30 days as part of the separation agreement, because Flo had made sure I had documentation of every cent. Nathan filed for divorce in November. Sienna moved out on a cold Saturday, taking what was hers. She left the kitchen in a state I won't describe. The curtains she'd picked out were still hanging. The throw pillows she'd chosen were still on the couch. Nathan sat in the living room that afternoon looking at those pillows for a long time. I sat next to him. I didn't say anything wise. I didn't offer a lesson. I just sat there, the way my father used to sit next to me when things were bad. Not to fix it, just to make the room feel less empty. After a while he said, "Dad, I need to ask you something." I said, "Go ahead." He said, "Did you ever actually want to move into the garage?" I looked at him. He already knew the answer. He'd probably known for a while. I said, "No." He was quiet. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I don't know why I let that happen." I said, "You were in love." And she was smart about it. Those two things together can make a very convincing picture of something that isn't real. He said, "That's generous of you." I said, "I'm your father. I've been generous with you since before you could walk." He laughed a little at that. Just a little. It was enough. I moved back into the house in December, back into the main bedroom. Nathan took the room at the end of the hall, the one Carol used to use as a reading room. He's still there now. We have dinner together most nights. He's working through things. Therapy twice a week, which I pushed for and which he initially resisted and now says is the best thing he's done in years. He got a promotion at work in February. He's been running more. I see him leave early in the mornings, headphones in, moving down the driveway at a steady pace. He looks better. He looks like himself. I brought my mother's china back up from where Sienna had stored it in the basement. Set it back in the hutch in the dining room, chipped one of the soup bowls getting it up the stairs. Stood there looking at it for a second, then decided a chip was just a chip. I never did replace the green armchair. I bought a different one. Dark blue. A little stiffer. Nothing like the original. I'm getting used to it. That's what you do. You find something different and you get used to it, and after a while it starts to feel like yours. Carol's reading glasses are still on the bookshelf in the bedroom, right where I put them the day she died. I don't know why I never moved them. Maybe because they're exactly where she would have set them down, next to the lamp, at an angle, the way she always did when she was planning to come back and keep reading. Some things you keep. Some things you let go. Knowing the difference is the whole thing, really. It took me 64 years and one very bad year to understand that more fully than I ever wanted to. But I do understand it now. And that counts for something. I've been thinking a lot about what I would tell a younger version of myself. Some man in his 40s, busy, confident, certain that love alone is enough to hold a family together. I think I'd sit him down and say, love is necessary, but it is not sufficient. You also need to pay attention. You need to stay clear-eyed even when clarity is uncomfortable. Especially then. What happened with Nathan and Sienna wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow erosion. And the reason it went on as long as it did is because I chose comfort over truth for too long. I told myself that moving into the garage was generosity. It wasn't, it was avoidance dressed up as sacrifice. There's a real difference between those two things, and I know that now in a way I can't unknow. The intelligence part. What I'd call the intelligence of it. The wisdom. Came when I stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking like an engineer again. I had the skills the whole time. I spent 31 years identifying stress fractures before structures failed. I just had to apply that same discipline to what was happening in my own house. Once I did, the picture became clear very quickly. The withdrawals. The account registered in Sienna's name. The pattern of Wednesdays. None of it was hidden once I decided to actually look. That decision, to look clearly instead of look away, that's the moral part. Not morality in some abstract sense, but the practical ethics of self-respect. A man who lets himself be diminished, who carries his own furniture out to a garage apartment while his son watches from the driveway, is not being noble. He is teaching everyone around him that his dignity has no floor. Nathan needed to see that I had a floor. Showing him that wasn't cruelty. It was the most fatherly thing I did in that entire year. And the resilience, the energy, wasn't the dramatic confrontation in the garage, though that mattered. The real endurance was the 8 months before it. Going to those dinners. Keeping up the yard. Watching my mother's china get boxed away, and my armchair put on the curb, and not exploding. Not withdrawing into bitterness. Not letting grief make me into someone Carol wouldn't recognize. That kind of steadiness is not passivity. It is its own form of strength, and it costs more than people realize. What I know now, at 64, is that consequences follow choices the way shadows follow people. Not immediately, not loudly, but without exception. Sienna made choices. Nathan made choices. Nathan made choices. Every one of those choices led somewhere. The $20,000 came back. Nathan is in therapy and running again in the mornings. I am back in the main bedroom with Carol's reading glasses on the shelf where they belong. None of that happened because the universe intervened. It happened because I stopped waiting for someone to fix it, and became, finally, the most strategic version of myself. Patient. Document. Clear. That's the only lesson here. Not that good people always win, because they don't, but that good people who also pay attention, who protect themselves without losing their decency, who stay in the room even when the room is hard. Those people tend to end up somewhere worth being. I'm somewhere worth being now. It took longer than it should have. But I'm here.